Richard Ramirez is one of the scariest serial killers of all time by a landslide. And it's not even because of how like brutal and chaotic he was, but for me it's the fact that like nobody was off limits for this dude. The majority of serial killers have some sort of like victim pool they focus on. So for example, Ted Bundy, if you weren't a young woman with long dark hair parted down the middle, you'd be fine. I would be screwed. John Wayne Gacy, if you weren't an adolescent boy, you'd be fine. Gary Ridgway, if you weren't a sex worker, you'd be fine. And that's not to say that these guys weren't terrifying to the demographic that they were targeting. But fuck, with Richard Ramirez, nobody was safe. He killed men, women, children, the elderly, all races, all ages, all genders. It was literally whoever he could get his hands on. So Richard Ramirez was known as the Night Stalker. He was an active serial killer in the 80s in California. And the reason he got the name the Night Stalker is because he would break into houses in the middle of the night and literally just murder brutally whoever was there. He was also a child essayer. This guy was just absolutely fucking despicable. I'm so worked up about how terrible he is, I forgot to put up a picture of him. So yes, this is one of the most depraved and despicable serial killers in American history. However, if you look at his childhood, it's truly a no wonder why he turned out the way that he did. His father was a really violent alcoholic, was physically, verbally, mentally abusive towards him and his siblings and his mother. I remember reading one thing that his father's form of punishment towards Richard was tying him to a cross in a nearby cemetery and making him stay there overnight outside. And then on top of his really fucked up home life, Richard had a cousin who was a Vietnam vet, and Richard used to like go hang out with his cousin to escape his terrible home life, which ended up just being worse for him because his cousin would show Richard these pictures of him in Vietnam violently essaying and unaliving these Vietnamese women. And when Richard was 12, his cousin shot his own wife in the head in front of Richard. So this is absolutely not excusing his behavior at all, because there are many kids who are abused and don't end up to be serial killers, but he definitely had your quintessential serial killer childhood. It's also been said that he's suffered several brain injuries as a kid, which I did a video on before, because while I don't think brain injuries are the sole reason people become serial killers, I think it for sure exacerbates things for people who are already prone to violence or antisocial fantasies. Richard was the epitome of a disorganized serial killer, so he essentially broke into homes with no plan, no weapons, he used whatever was around him, and again, literally would kill anybody in his wake. In total, he ended up murdering 16 people. I highly recommend this docuseries on Netflix if you haven't seen it. It interviews the real detectives in the case and goes through their whole process of how they caught him, and it's really cool. And I simply don't have enough time for all of it. But it has to do with a shoe print, his dental records, it's wild. Richard was also a devout Satanist. At his trial, his final words were literally, "Lucifer dwells in us all." But the way Richard was caught is my favorite case of vigilante justice. They plastered him all over the newspapers, and he was literally caught by the people. He made the mistake of going to a Hispanic neighborhood and trying to steal a car, and these people literally beat him within an inch of his life and held him down until the police came. But don't worry, when he got to prison, he had a whole fan club and even got married.